Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Carmen Blair, the Deputy Director of the San Mateo County History Museum, and I'd like to welcome you to this afternoon's Courthouse Docket. The Courthouse Docket is a monthly series of lectures and performances held here in historic Courtroom A. Today, we have a panel discussion for human trafficking in San Mateo County, what it is and how you can help. And to lead us in this panel discussion, we have Warren Dale. So please welcome Warren Dale for our panel discussion.
Thank you, Carmen. And yes, indeed, the San Mateo History Museum is indeed one of our sponsors. I'm the president of the Peninsula Sunrise Rotary Club, and we're hosting this panel discussion as well as a reception afterwards. We invite you to stay, enjoy each other's company. We also recognize that during discussions such as this, sometimes our bodies remember certain things and so give us signals. And so we like to have a variety of ways of helping you to take care of yourselves. One of which is to take a deep breath and exhale. That's the first thing. And notice people around you that are safe people for you. A second way is be able to take a walk if you need to exit for a while, even to daydream if you need to. A third way is we do have support people around. Are they in the audience here, the support people somewhere? Okay, so they're downstairs. If you need to talk with somebody, gain some support and even a referral, they're available to you as well. And also, we have some colored stickums here. You'll see two poster boards in the back. The stickums are at the edge of the rows there, just a couple of rows, but anyway, you can pass those around. If you have a thought, some people would say a prayer for somebody, whether that person is someone you know or not. Please feel free to jot that down and put it up on the board so you have an opportunity to express something of caring. We'll also hear some other specific ways as well. And then finally, my working with women in Bosnia and in the peninsula in terms of those who have been sexually abused as children, we recognize that there was a common experience for many, and that's that those experiences came with various kinds of threats. And those threats got trained basically into the cellular parts of our bodies. And so when people started to take a step for themselves, that trained self would often give that signal of threat, even if they didn't have words for it. And so what we do is we recognize that while it's a troubling feeling for some, it's also a signal in a sense that you're stepping away, that you're hearing new information or collaborative information for yourselves. And so again, we invite you to take care of yourselves. As you listen today, there are 4 factors that affect the impact of trauma that I've been working on. The first one is the type of experience it is. The more personal it is, the more challenging it is. The second is the individual differences, the coping mechanisms that we've developed, previous traumatic experiences, some of which we've resolved and having helped us to build resiliency, and others not so much, and they linger. Sometimes spiritual or religious resources are both positive and or negative, depending upon the messages that we've experienced. So there's no guarantee as to which way that flows for us. The third factor is our support system. And we hope today, by bringing people together and saying that San Mateo County and elsewhere has a support system that is there for many people, for people who are your friends, people who are your neighbors, people that might even be yourselves in terms of some form of abuse or trafficking. And then the fourth one is how long a person is in the experience and their response to it during the incidents. For example, if you take the case of a sexual assault, it may have occurred on a specific date, but if they go home and the home isn't in a responsive mood, doesn't know how to respond, that seems like a continuation of the event. If they even talk with some people trying to figure out what resources are available, they may feel that they're being re-experiencing or had an added aspect of their assault. And finally, if they go into the legal system, courtroom A, they might find that the way in which people ask them questions seems to be a continuation of the assault. And so we're trying to address those in a variety of ways, and you'll hear those as we speak today. So I'm going to introduce Betty Ann is the founder of the Bay Area Anti-Trafficking Coalition. Betty Ann, will you welcome her? Denisha, a supervisor with the San Mateo County Children and Family Services. Will you welcome? Regina, poet, playwright, social justice performer. Catherine is a pediatric endocrinologist with Kaiser Permanente. And Mike Brosnan, Human Trafficking Program Coordinator in the San Mateo County Sheriff's Office. We'll each do about an 8-minute presentation, and then we'll have time for questions. I'll be passing out the cards upon which you can write those questions in a few minutes. And so I turn it over now to Betty Ann, if you'll lead us off.
Thanks, Warren. It's just so encouraging to see such a full room, and I see a lot of friendly faces and also a lot of new folks in the room. I want to welcome you. One of the things that we're known for at the Bay Area Anti-Trafficking Coalition, we call ourselves the BAATC, to shorten that very long name, is that we talk about the framework of how to think about this, the framework for how to think about what you could do and how you could get involved in the fight against human trafficking. And one of the things we really wanted to land today was actually addressing 4 myths. So some of you have heard me speak somewhat before. We're really going to land it in San Mateo County today, and I'm really honored to be a part of this incredible panel with my friends. What we're going to look at is that human trafficking is happening here. It's not just happening there. Human trafficking is happening to boys. It's not just happening to girls. Human trafficking involves sex trafficking, but it also involves labor trafficking, which a lot of people are just learning about now, that it's not just sex trafficking. And lastly, it's not just happening to foreign nationals. It's actually a huge risk to our own American citizens. So we'll hear from experts on the panel about the reality of that here in San Mateo County and some of the numbers locally. What I wanted to do was help paint a picture of what we're learning about the issue and just how to think about it. A lot of people come to me and they say, I've heard you talk about trafficking and I'm ready to join you now. It's the fastest growing criminal activity in the world. So as we think about how to engage, we've got to ask, what is our piece of the pie? What is the piece that we can actually affect? And how can we make a difference in our own sphere of influence? So I want to challenge you as I kind of start off with a real kind of maybe educational or heady conversation. We're also going to move into just how this has impacted each of us and why we're so passionate about it. And so I'd really encourage you to take that journey today as well, from the head to the heart, and ask yourself, how might my life look different because I care about this issue? So human trafficking, just the definition of it can get really wordy in here and there, but there's 3 important words, and you'll see the slides up behind me. Force, fraud, and coercion. If we can actually prove that someone is being held in an exploited situation, either sex or labor or both, and we can prove that there's a third-party entity that is making money off that exploitation, we can actually prove force, fraud, or coercion. That then brings to bear the human trafficking laws that we have now out there. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on statistics because these are very global and large, but there is an estimated 27 million or even above that slaves in the world today. That is people working under exploited situations. And that a lot of these are children and many of them are women. But a lot of people mainly ask me, why would people do this, right? Why would gangs, why would people who have been trafficking in guns and drugs, why would they switch to human trafficking? It's because they're making so much money at it. It's a $150 billion industry, it's estimated, per year. One of the things I like to point out is some of us mainly hear about this or first hear about it on a global landscape. Some of you may have just walked by today and you're lucky to kind of step into it just on the local side. But a lot of us have heard about it happening in India or Cambodia or across Africa. And it's a little bit more shocking when all of a sudden we start hearing in the newspaper or by a day like today where we're like, wow, it's happening here. But we also noticed that the crime here in Silicon Valley, we talk a lot about the positive impacts of the internet. We've also got to embrace that that has actually got an underbelly to it, and through the internet, it is bringing a lot of this issue into our homes. So by the websites that we view, by the huge connection with pornography, by the understanding that 80% of prostitution is arranged online now, not on a street corner. We have to acknowledge the importance of looking at fighting this crime through the internet as well. So from our home is the very place that we can understand that the crime is really reaching us personally, but also we can say that is the very place in which we start to take action. We can say we can look at various websites, we can start to put our consumer action, we can say we want to be about something, and we can send message to companies, to our local law enforcement, to people in our community, and we can make a stand there. We can also be the eyes and ears about what are the businesses that we see in our community that you think might be a front for something illicit. And that's how we make an impact on the global scene. One of the stories I love is a friend of mine in San Jose decided to go check out it was a hair salon, and he said, I just kind of thought it was interesting that at noon, all these construction workers would go in to get their hair cut, but a lot of them didn't even have that much hair on top. And he said, but every day there were all these big trucks pulling in. Well, so he decides to go in and just said, I'd like a haircut. Took him 20 minutes to find a pair of scissors. So I can tell you that's not what they do for business. He ended up then walking into the San Jose Police Department with the best evidence ever, which was a horrible haircut that went. They actually took a picture of his hair as evidence and actually was able to shut that down. Weeks later, they did a raid and found that that was a front for prostitution. So our eyes and ears, we really can make a difference, and we can let our local law enforcement know what we're seeing in our own community. In California, some people, again, are just kind of like, Betty Ann, I don't necessarily believe it happens here. It is estimated that we're in one of the top 3 states for human trafficking, that we're in the top in terms of worst child sex trafficking in San Francisco, San Diego, and Los Angeles. And we do have some laws that are coming onto the books, especially Prop 35 that passed a few years ago, that is requiring training of law enforcement, and it is also making harsher sentences for traffickers. But trafficking still carries a much lighter sentence than often rape or kidnapping. I wanted to point out that all the faces of trafficking that you will hear about today throughout the different exhibits and here on this panel, all of them have been found to exist here in the Bay Area. So we just need to be paying attention that it is happening here. That house that I put on the picture there, the reason I mention that is because it was one of the first homes to be identified as a residential brothel, again in the South Bay. And it was a neighbor that was walking by with their dog and said, it's weird because we're not in a neighborhood where you need bars on the outside of the window to keep people from getting in, but this house had bars on the inside of the windows to keep people from getting out. Those are the kind of things that we can be looking for as neighbors in our own community. So in the face of local human trafficking here in the Bay Area, I often like to talk about whether you might be someone who's got grandkids or kids and you might be at a park, you meet a nanny, seems like she's got physical bruising or she's somewhat despondent or she doesn't want to talk to anyone. And then we've got nail salon and foot massage employees that you might have a relationship with. They might not be able to tell you where they live outside of the salon. It might be that they're actually made to live in the salon at night when it closes. And lastly, a child working at a restaurant. We go out during the day to a restaurant, but a child serving us lunch, why isn't that kid in school? These are now the things that can be tipped off and have us understand that we are a part of the solution because we can report that either to local law enforcement or to the National Human Trafficking Hotline. I would love for everyone here today to not leave without putting the national hotline number in your phone so that if you see something, you can call up and ask questions, you can report tips. And as of 2015, California is again the top state for tips coming into the National Human Trafficking Hotline. It's totally anonymous and confidential, but I've called it a couple times. I used to live on Woodside Road, right in Redwood City, and there was a massage parlor that we called in because at 9 o'clock at night it would say it closed, but at 8:50 we saw a bunch of cars pulling in. There's no 10-minute massage on the books. So lastly, I would like to just say, as you think about, again, the title of this was kind of what is human trafficking, but what can you do about it? I would encourage you to think about this issue in 3 various buckets, if you will. Some people are really oriented towards prevention. That's a lot of what we do at the Bay Area Anti-Trafficking Coalition, is work on training of frontline employees, training how to view it in your own neighborhoods. Maybe ask yourself about your consumer choices, things you might be purchasing that are made by child slaves, things like that. and general public awareness. Or you might be somebody that's like, hey, I'm ready to now go bust down the door on those massage parlors. Please come talk to me or Mike Brosnan before you do that, because we don't want you to get arrested. But there's ways in which you can actually get involved in actually meeting some of these victims in a place of trying to connect with them and get them to consider a potential life change. And the other one is aftercare and really considering working with survivors of human trafficking, potentially vocational training, engaging if you're a counselor or various other types of help that you could be meeting the needs of those survivors. So I just want you to say again, it's a huge issue. We can often come at it and then minutes later we can feel like we just went from obliviousness to paralysis. And today is about finding your place and about finding your voice in what you can do. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Betty Ann. I think the fast talking comes from covering all that basketball and the quick movements.
You told me 8 minutes.
Thank you, thank you. Regina, pardon me, Catherine, will you now
Yes.
tell your experience?
Okay. Is everyone hearing me okay? All right. I'm a physician at Kaiser, and you might ask, why am I here? Well, I was one of those people in 2010, one of most physicians or medical providers that really had a very limited awareness of this topic. As we heard at the rally this afternoon, I think that was pretty common in 2010. And I think, unfortunately, it's still probably true for many medical providers, healthcare workers. But we know that the awareness is increasing. And in 2010, it became personal for me because I had a patient who we realized was being trafficked. And it was happening right before our eyes. And many of us saw her, came into contact with her before what was evident. She had been referred to me when she was 14 for an endocrine problem which no one knew at the time was serious, but it was actually life-threatening, and it took 8 months for her to actually see me because the night before her appointment, she ran away from home. She ran away from home, and within a day, she was picked up by traffickers. And this was actually in her neighborhood. I'm sure she was, as I learned later, she was being groomed to be picked up by an older boy in the neighborhood as part of a ring that provided prostitution and drugs throughout the Bay Area. When we heard her story later, she was trafficked in the East Bay, the North Bay, and in this area as well. It took 8 months for her to come back to see me, and we didn't know that what her diagnosis was until that time. She came in with a woman who was of a different ethnicity, who was about late 20s, and said, "This is my aunt." And we called her mother. We couldn't reach her right away, but it was obvious from the notes that she had been coming in for gynecology care, for sexual transmitted diseases to different Kaisers throughout the East Bay. And each time it was clear that there was something wrong with this picture, but I think none of us had it in our awareness to know at that time what to do. So as time went on, we did get her back into medical care, but then she missed appointments again. She had gotten back with her traffickers, and she came in to see me finally so that we were able to deal with this serious problem in shackles and handcuffs at 15, because she was arrested for drug trafficking. And as we know now, she was a victim. There was no way that she should have been treated like a criminal, and it was just so eye-opening to see this. It was so concerning to all of us in my endocrine practice that were taking care of her and helping her. We went through with her for a number of years, taking care of her primary disease, and we helped her with social work and other skills. She reunited with her mother, and she's now a young adult. I would say she's survived her trafficking experience, and she's survived her medical problem, but there's scars from both. This inspired me to become more knowledgeable because I realized I didn't have the knowledge, and when I looked on our family violence prevention website, there was no information about human trafficking. Well, that's changed now. There is human trafficking on our website. And I actually told my patient's story to Bridget McCaw, the doctor in charge of Kaiser's Family Violence for Northern California, and she said, we're really busy, we have a lot of things on our agenda, but this story was too compelling, we have to address this issue. Now we have on our website resources for physicians, in particular from the hotline and the other information. There's a 30-minute video from the National Human Trafficking website that is on our clinical library where physicians or providers can get that training quickly and find other resources, excuse me. But we really need more information, and this is still an area that's really just being addressed now. And we know from recent studies that 88% of people that are being trafficked come into contact with healthcare workers, and that means that and about 60% are in emergency rooms, but some may be like my young lady who was being seen for gynecology issues, and there were all kinds of red flags there, of course, because she was coming in with a young man identified as her boyfriend for these problems. So when we look back, I was looking back and trying to see where could we have made an intervention, and now I think we all are realizing that there's red flags, and there are a number of things that we can do. I got involved with Shared Hope International from Friends a few years ago as part of this, and which is a group that was founded by Linda Smith, a former congresswoman. And that's through Shared Hope, I became a volunteer for ambassador for Shared Hope, but I also went to their training program, which is every year in Washington, D.C. in November. So I learned a lot more at that program. I donated. Many of the people that I met through that group have been really helpful because they're working with United Methodist Church in the Bay Area. They're working before the Super Bowl for awareness. So there's a lot of things you can do as a volunteer. But also, I ended up talking with Linda Smith, and I became a reviewer for the program that they're now going to present in June at the Just First Responder Conference in Phoenix. So we're actually looking at training for healthcare providers. We also have on our website the program from Massachusetts General, which is 70 pages, so it's lengthy to read, but it's very, very thorough in terms of what we can do as healthcare workers, physicians, nurses, et cetera. But we know that it's really just a start. I just joined last year the AMWA, the American Medical Women's Association, and they have an excellent program. They have it now you could access on their website called PATH, which is the Physicians Against Trafficking of Humans. And they also have training that can be very helpful with a video for anyone really could access it. But again, it comes back to the place where I think we're all realizing, all of our medical organizations are recognizing that this is a growing issue, it's a serious issue, and many of us just, we don't have, as we get confronted, it comes out of the blue like this where it won't be something where you can prepare in a sense. So we really are getting to the point where all physicians, medical students, residents are going to need to have training, emergency room staff, nurses, et cetera, because as Betty was saying, it could be anyone. It could be the desk clerk at the motel. It could be you. It could be any of us that are going to see these red flags and warning signs. I also want to say just one other thought, which is that one of the studies that was done actually with Southern California Kaiser is the CDC Kaiser ACE study, ACE standing for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And this study showed how as you increase the childhood experiences of trauma, including sexual trauma particularly, that your risks of serious psychological and other health issues, disease, chronic disease, even death, accelerates as those adverse experiences increase. And 2/3 of us have had at least one of those adverse experiences. One of the things about that study that's helpful now is it's really, I think it gives us a tool because of the questionnaire and the training with that. The pediatricians now in our group are going to be using a similar questionnaire with families proactively to identify these adverse experiences early, because what we really want to do as healthcare providers, and that's Kaiser's focus has always been on preventive care, we want to prevent this happening. We want to go back to do something to address the underlying root causes. And some of these are financial, they're cultural, there's many other issues, both because of things with the economy as well as the internet that have sort of lend themselves to this explosion really of trafficking. But there's also a lot of stress on families, and that's where I see that our focus as pediatricians in particular and as physicians and healthcare providers and nurses and psychologists is going to be looking at what can we do to address this for both boys and girls so that we see this very heartbreaking problem start to heal, hopefully in our lifetimes. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you. Regina, will you address us and share with us?
Hello, everyone. So I do a couple of things as in the field of abolition. So I am a social justice playwright and performer, but I also own a very cute little vintage shop, which is amazing. In Oakland, California, we sell amazing vintage, but what we also do is we are a safe haven for survivors of sex trafficking. We're also a safe haven for homeless youth, for homeless women, and for Oakland young creatives who are, and sometimes that spans one of them, they'll just be all of those, homeless, trafficked, creative youth. So it's a very kind of counterintuitive business. We operate off of love and worry about the money later. So, but we also have great supporters like these two ladies here who have been instrumental in actually collecting, and this is how people can become involved with the fight. I'm not sure how they heard about me, but I got an email saying we would like to do, from Temple Beth and we would like to do a dress drive. So they literally did a 4-month dress drive for my store and invited us to a party to collect it. It was about 3 loads or more, right, of like SUV loads filled with vintage. And then they continued to collect it, and then they drove it up to my store. And I know that they were just checking on me to make sure I'm okay as well. But these are some of the, and I thank you guys so much, but these are, like, that's one way you can be, like, who would ever think that that's gonna affect the fight against trafficking, right? But I have, through Love Never Fails, hired 8 survivors of trafficking through the Love Never Fails workforce development program. So the stock that they brought up helped to support them as well. And so, like, with I feed people, I make sure that and I'm only 2 years, I make sure that their kids have clothes. I'm always on the phone. Okay, I have someone who needs clothes. I have someone who needs their rent paid. I have someone who needs groceries. That's why I do love before I do the bottom line, because I know I'm gonna be okay. I don't want anyone coming to me saying, because they call me Mama Reg, I need this, and I'm not able to give it to them. I will give it to them before I'll look after myself, but I'm always taken care of. And I say that to you because sometimes we as humans pull back from great acts or deeply loving acts because we wonder how it's going to affect us. And I want to encourage you into this fight to not hold back, because you will be provided for. You will be looked after. You will be cared for, because that's how the universe works. Okay? So I want to say that to you very strongly. So besides doing workforce development, I do holistic wellness and creative arts healing, because what I found is that we can provide people with jobs, we can provide them with housing, but a wounded soul is not able to carry the weight of responsibility for very long. And so it needs to be healed. And so those 2 trains need to run at the same time. And so we do healing circles. One of my sisters, oh, there she is. She's done yoga in the store. We've done Haitian dancing. We've done African drumming. We've had an old school, and I'm in my 50s, so when I'm saying old school, I mean like old school soul party. Everybody's like out on my sidewalk dancing. Dancing is very healing, and we had a bunch of soul food. So you have people, young women, sitting on the floor with plates, eating fried chicken, and folks outside dancing, and we're all laughing because joy is what? Joy is healing. And these young women need to be able to laugh, okay? And so we do that type of thing in my store. It's a very open space. I don't have a lot of rules. My rules are respect one another and don't smoke weed in my store. I'm a Roman-free store, because I'm in Oakland, everybody smokes weed. I'm like, what is going on? Like, seriously, everyone does. It's insane. So I'm like, if you've smoked weed within an hour of coming to my store, don't come to my store. So, and they all know that now. So I want to leave you with a story. People ask me, why did I start my store? And sometimes I really don't know. But I'll give you this as an example. One day I looked out the window, there was a guy standing out there with a little tiny dog. And I love animals, so I ran out after him, and I'm asking him questions like I'm interested in, like, where do you live? So what's your name? But I'm petting the dog because I just want to pet the dog. And so we get into this long conversation. And so he tells me he's waiting for his girlfriend who is down the street at First Place for Youth, and she's in a meeting with her counselor because she wants to, start a nonprofit to help sex trafficking survivors, right? So I'm beginning to freak out, but I'm calm. So I said, can you bring her here when she finishes? So they go and get her. She comes to the store, and she's a little bit freaked out because he's telling her what I'm doing, right? And so we just connected. And so I asked her, I said, do you want to work here? And she said, yes. And then they gave me the dog. Another story. They gave me the dog. I was like, oh my God, I have a pit bull dog. And I know. So long story short, so Love Never Fails hires her, sends her to my store as an intern. We do an intake. The internships are only 3 months, but she actually stayed with me for a year, and she is like my daughter now, literally. And she has graduated from what's Hack the Hood. Hack the Hood trains young people to be web developers. So she actually is a survivor. I forgot to say that too. She was, I think, 16 being trafficked. So I'm surrounding her, my community, because I have a lot of young kids in my community. They're surrounding her. They're taking her to the park for yoga and other creative things, and everyone's loving on her, and she's beginning to thrive. Her boyfriend, on the other hand, he's still like, hey, what's up, what's up, it's cool. I'm like, dude, you're gonna have to get a job. That's what I said to him. And he said, okay, Mom. I was like, wow, that really worked. I was like, that was good. I was like, yay, go me. So he goes and gets a job. And he's a smart kid. He's just, sometimes they need people to say, this is what you need to do. He goes and he gets a job in a restaurant around the corner. And I said, you need to pass by my store when you're going, and you need to come back, and you need to, when you're leaving. So he would do that, and then he would bring me food. And I'd say, oh my God, this is really good. And he said, oh, well, I cook it. I was like, oh my God, this kid is really gifted. So I pick up the phone, I call a friend. I said, I think you should hire this kid. Now, mind you, he used to be an ex-exploiter, right? So I got a twofer because I saw a little dog, because I built a store, right? Long story short, they hire him. He is now the chef de partie at this nonprofit. He manages their kitchen. He is on salary. He's making a pretty good salary. He has health care and dental care for the first time in his life, and so do all his kids. And she's doing well too. She now wants to start her own business. I've surrounded her with a team of people. She has her own business coach. She's been to huge conferences. Everyone loves her. And so that's all because I started a business on just complete faith. And so when you put yourself out there, those are the kind of things that happen. So I want to encourage you to do that. I'm sorry, I know I probably went over my 8 minutes, but Anyway.
Thank you, Regina. How do you stop anybody from speaking on this podium? And of course, you recognize that it was not only just starting a store, it was noticing opportunities to extend a hand, and that continues to build and be passed on. Denisha, would you share your story with us?
Sure. Super loud. Okay. So my name is Denisha Cormier. I'm a social work supervisor now with San Mateo County. I've been employed there for the last 8 years. So I'm a former foster youth raised in Oakland, was familiar with human sex trafficking through my experiences of being recruited, but not being groomed, but not actively being trafficked in that light, being able to kind of recognize some things just weren't right at 14 or 15. And thankfully, I had a lot of family support where I could relocate out of the area to get away from some really dangerous people. So when I came to San Mateo County as a social worker, I started working with just foster youth, and I came to find out that half of my caseload were young girls who were being sexually trafficked. And I just naturally had like a heartbreak for them. And so for me, it wasn't enough just to case manage them. For me, it was about, well, what can we do? And, you know, a decade ago in San Mateo County, at least within Children and Family Services, there wasn't much that was happening or occurring. I have a couple ladies here with me today. We decided to start a task force. We call it a CSEC, Commercially Sexually Exploited Children, is a terminology task force. And we had little support initially going in because, again, it wasn't something that was recognized as a problem here, especially not in San Mateo County. And so we took our initiatives to go outside of the county, go to Oakland, go to places like Missy, Sage in San Francisco that's no longer around, but be trained outside of the county to come back and train our colleagues and our peers and how to engage and work with this population. From there, we also started a prevention program. We just finished celebrating year 4, where we started off with 8 girls that has now grown to over 100 girls that come once a year. We put on a full day-long conference to educate them about the dangers of sex trafficking, their vulnerabilities by being victims of sexual abuse, neglect, physical abuse, those things that got them into the foster care system. You know, I think we all kind of were like, what's one thing that we really want to make sure that people take away in our time in speaking? And I know for me, it's that I really want to charge everyone in this room to use whatever your gift is to contribute to this population in some kind of way. I think all these ladies have already spoken to that. And, you know, with me, I saw that there was nothing, and I was like, well, what's the best way to get the word out? And I realized that I can't rescue every single girl that's out there. I've tried. And what I've come to, you know, find out through trials and failures and tribulations and joys and things along the way of this journey is just that you can make a difference. You can make a remarkable difference. You might not see the difference that you make in the life of a young person, but you really can. And whatever your talent is, I know Regina talked about, you know, yoga and dance and all these things. Being able to work with a victim who was ready to exit human trafficking, and time and opportunity met for us to be able to pull her from that and relocate her and be able to start that process, as these ladies have talked about. It's not just taking a child out of one situation and putting them in another, because all of that trauma, all of that pain is still existing within them. And so being able to have those outlets through art, or one girl used to be a gymnast and an ice skater, and we were able to kind of get her back into programs around that, reconnecting that child with that dream that they once had that got lost in the shuffle of their time of being exploited. And so each of us have a gift that we can offer a young person, and then also the eyes to see them. For those who are not aware, a year ago, it'll be a year this summer, this is now a mandate charge to Child and Family Services to go out and investigate. So prior to this, it was kind of, there would be calls to law enforcement, calls to CPS, calls all over the place, and no one governmental entity was kind of charged with going out and rescuing and serving this population. At the same time, these youth, I keep on saying girls, and as Betty Ann talked about, it's definitely girls and boys, but I've primarily worked with girls. I have worked with boys as well. It looks a little bit different, but these youth were and continue to be treated as perpetrators instead of as the victims, as the survivors that they really are. So being able to educate yourself and get training around that, and then being able to kind of spread that to those in your lives, even if you don't get up on a panel and, you know, speak to a room full of people, you can start with your family members, with the people at your church, with the people in your household. You can start with an 8-year-old child in your own life, and educating them in an age-appropriate manner about things to look out for. The other thing is that we need to stay updated with the times. These traffickers get smarter and smarter. As interveners, we need to get smarter and smarter as well. And so, it's not always what you would traditionally think in your head about a girl walking down the street wearing a mini skirt and popping her gum and a pimp pulling up in a Cadillac with a hat tilted to the side. It is a lot of internet scams. It is a lot of girls thinking they're going to become a model or sing a hook on a song or a backup dancer or all these different things. It is through Instagram and Facebook. It's not just Backpage or Redbook or some of these raunchier sites. It's all these things. And so being able to be aware of that, monitor it for the kids in your own lives, and educate these youth around it is really important. So I just want to leave you with that.
Thank you. Thank you. Mike, will you bring us up to date on the Sheriff's Office?
Thank you.
Your program.
Thank you. And I too will be challenged by 8 minutes, but I want to start with how lucky am I to be able to work with these champions up here. I want to give them one more round of applause because the passion that I'm surrounded by every single day drives me to work harder than I think I'm working, and I want to thank you guys for that. So Mike Brosnan is my name. I spent 28 plus years in South San Francisco with the police department. Finished my career as a deputy chief of police, and I'm a Jesuit-educated kid from South San Francisco, and I was very proud to be the voice for victims. Let me say that again. I was very proud to be the voice for victims. However, this demographic, this population that I'm working with now, we did not see as victims, and therefore I was not their voice, and I let them down quite often. So that inability, that ignorance, that inability for me to be the voice in those 28 plus years drives me today. And again, I get to work with the champions to my left. So as you heard today, on July 1 of 2015, our Board of Supervisors transferred monies, Measure A monies, that's normally used for infrastructure issues. I'm here to tell you right now, as a son of a general contractor, we are building an infrastructure, a foundation for a better tomorrow on this topic. It's money well spent. And our 4 cornerstones are simple, and they are enforcement. San Mateo County, we are very privileged to have a district attorney's office that are driven to hold law violators accountable. That will never, ever stop, and we're very fortunate to have Steve Wagstaff in his. But you heard, as a part of force, fraud, or coercion, the verbiage, if we can prove. Force, fraud, or coercion is a part of all of this, and it's our job as first responders, as a law enforcement piece of this, to educate ourselves so that, like homicides, like narcotics, like domestic violence, like gang-related behavior, where we spent many, many years understanding the culture so that we can prove misbehavior and give the district attorney's office enough of a report to send people away to a location where they need to be. This is a topic where we are under-prepared, and that's another piece of my journey here, is to train our personnel, our law enforcement personnel. And this is not just a San Mateo County thing. This is a regional effort. We're very lucky to have the Bay Area Anti-Trafficking Coalition in our county. But this is absolutely a regional thing. These 4 bridges that connect the entire Bay Area, connect exploiter and suspect movement. And we heard some of the cases this morning. Some of our suspects and victims are coming from Sacramento, the Sacramento area. So we have to engage in the relationship building and the training and the crossover in terms of law enforcement so that we can work together and not be concerned about who's actually going to prosecute the case, work together so that some entity, whether it's state, local, or federal, can get the job done. and that we can take care of that side, and that we can start to build the capacity to have exit strategies for these victims, survivors, to find a better day. So in November of 15, I too went to Shared Hope. Shared Hope, and I thought I knew the path I was on until I got to Washington, D.C., and was a part of 700 people. 10%, 70 were survivors. And I found myself seeking out those 70 survivors, and as soon as they found out what part of this puzzle equation I came from, they told me, I wish, during that traffic stop, I prayed during that call for service that somebody would have ran my name, that somebody would have taken the time to actually find out why I was there as a 14, 15, 16-year-old, and we didn't. And they were telling me, you, law enforcement, the entire law enforcement community, were so concerned about what we defined as what was going on. We missed, and still continue to miss, but we're getting better. We missed this commodity. If there's 2 kilos of cocaine in the back seat, we're pretty good at that. 2 15-year-olds in the back seat, we're not that good, and we weren't that good. We're getting better there too, right? So it was the survivor voice that caused me to understand the path that I'm on, to continue to be the voice for victims that drove me in South San Francisco, that drove me in my law enforcement career. And now I know what this journey is. So the awareness piece is helping my peers, law enforcement, to the table in terms of the prevention side. Joining hands at the same table with health services, with welfare, with foster, with the courts, with other law enforcement, probation. You heard Janae Luttrell today. We're so lucky to have Janae Luttrell in San Mateo County. Education is a huge piece of this, the Department of Education and getting education into our youngsters, the earlier the better. Those perspectives, it sounds crazy, are at the same table for the first time. For the first time as far as law enforcement is concerned. And it's going to be powerful, the potential we have, if we all pull on the rope in the same direction. It's going to be powerful. I look forward to seeing that happen. Collaboratively, No Traffic Ahead is just an umbrella group that is part of 60 different entities, sworn civilian business, that are coming together with like goals in mind and make progress. And as far as training, it's not just police officers that we're a part of. We're training the hotel and hospitality. You heard this morning that a clerk, a trained, alert clerk, noticed some criminal behavior in cold. We're training transportation, land, air, and sea. We're training hospital and healthcare. We know from domestic violence and we know from other parts of crime that victims are going to be in ERs with their abusers, their traffickers, either in the room, standing next to the bed, in the waiting room, or in the parking lot. We know that from other parts of crime, and it's going to happen here. It is happening here. We have to be prepared for that. The business community. This is an absolute business model that is about greed, supply, demand, distribution. So when we talk to the MBAs of the world, the business of the world, they get this, that we're looking to disrupt all pieces of this, supply, demand, distribution. Okay, and then law enforcement, we're doing training on the massage. We're bringing the California Massage Therapy Council next Tuesday for training. Next Wednesday, as a part of, you all know about a very successful gang task force that goes out every summer, 16-week deployment. This year, for the first time, the theme is going to be preparing those practitioners, 200 gang officers, next Wednesday, about the task they have. But new to that mission, is going to be merging the gang culture and the pimp culture. We're going to talk about how they're together now with revenue in mind and exploitation in mind, and we are going to help officers put the two together while they're looking at one, look for both. We know that it's happening in narcotics cases, it's happening in other organized crime cases. So, and ultimately, we're going to get to a place where every person sitting on the other side of the table from us that we are calling a suspect, we are going to ask questions similar to, did somebody else force or direct you to do the crime that you're talking to me about. Organized crime, force-directed behavior, force, fear, coercion, it's all there. We, as the first responders, the first 20 minutes can make or break it. And if we do make it, we have a district attorney's office, we have a community of 750,000 people here in San Mateo County that support the efforts that we do, but we're adding now 750,000 voices for survivors. Part of that survivor continuum. It works in, we talked about the cancer walk this morning. Survivors talking to a person that's in it right now that doesn't think they're going to get out of it, doesn't have the hope and the future to get out of it. A cancer survivor can be that person. Take my hand, I survived, so will you. It works there, it will work here, as long as we all join hands together with victims in mind. So I thank you for coming. I thank you for taking the time to prioritize this piece of social justice into your world. If you need me as a part of this human trafficking program coordination that's going on in San Mateo County to come speak to any of your groups in terms of initiating the conversation, elevating awareness, and being an active participant in the education of this, please call. I'm easy to find. Mike Brosnan, just ask anybody. They'll find me, right? And I'll be there with you. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Pam. Can you pass up? Yeah. Mike, I want to ask you the first question.
Sure.
As I'm collating these. You told about training for hotel people as well,
Yep.
and you related a story when Betty Ann and I attended a presentation similar to this up in Kenyatta, and you told a story of where somebody in the front desk noticed something. And what emerged out of law enforcement's involvement and that partnership and training, to me, was a very exciting story. Would you relay that to us?
So our DA, Steve Wagstaff, referred to it this morning as a clerk in South San Francisco that saw a trafficker, a pimp, check in on a Friday with 2 girls, check in on a Saturday with 2 different girls. This clerk had what we all know, that gut, that concern that we get in our belly when we get, and what gets in the way is not wanting to get in anybody else's business. She was trained, she was concerned, and she knew who to call. She called out. The investigation started, and Steve talked about 5 victims, one of which was a juvenile, 3 suspects, one of which was a female trafficker. One got 7 years, one got 18 years, one got 8 years, and the main trafficker got 13 years plus that 290 lifetime sexual sex registration. It was a landmark case because it was our first, and DA Wagstaff talked about 2 more since, and our officers now are starting to understand what force, fraud, and coercion looks like in this environment, and there's going to be more. And there's going to be more in terms of crossover crimes. We have robbery crews that are setting up shop, sending out victims, our ladies, but they're there to call in buyers, and they're there to rob buyers, because they know buyers are bringing cash, and they know buyers are very slow to call law enforcement. Why? Because they don't want their wife and children to find out what they're looking to buy. So these, like we talked about, staying out in front of tactics and behavior, that's just another piece of it. And one of the robbery cases was an armed robbery. So there's officer safety concerns here as well. So yes, as we have cases, mistakes are going to happen. Those are called growing pains. It's just like any other practice. I'm a coach too. Just like any other practice, we want you to stretch. We want you to make mistakes, because tomorrow's case, because of the mistake you made today, is going to be better.
And Warren, just to point out, Mike mentioned No Traffic Ahead as well as the hotel trainings. No Traffic Ahead was established right before the Super Bowl by the Bay Area Anti-Trafficking Coalition, Stanford University, and the South Bay Coalition to End Human Trafficking to have one website that everyone in the Bay Area could go to find out about human trafficking. So it's worth noting it's No Traffic Ahead with a CK at the end of traffic.com. But if anyone here is in the hospitality industry or is interested in joining us in going out and training hotels, we are currently on a path to train all 1,500 hotels in the Bay Area, and we'd love to have you come get trained and help us with that.
And Betty Ann, a follow-up question in terms of training. Are there programs available to high schools and middle schools?
Yeah, there's a lot of movement in the education area. Obviously, as Mike mentioned, we have our own education specialist here in the county, and you could talk to Mike about meeting Janae. But one of the things is that the state of California, the Department of Education, has actually partnered with 2 local organizations, one of which Regina mentioned, Love Never Fails, as well as Break Free, or 3 Strands, which is in Sacramento, and a third, which is the Frederick Douglass Foundation that has been working on talking about slavery in schools. And as of next year, in 34 counties across California, in 5th, 7th, 9th, and 11th grade, human trafficking will be discussed at an age-appropriate level to talk about healthy relationships, the forming of self-confidence, how to read about your safe space, and moving into how do you become an activist and be able to identify this if one of your friends or yourself is being exploited. But there is a lot to learn on that. There's also a bill going forward that has been passed and is getting a lot more renditions, but about learning about how students will be asked to be trained on human trafficking within healthcare classes. So you can just kind of Google California State Education and Human Trafficking, and you can learn more about that.
Thank you. Denisha, you mentioned...
Add on to that, but the program that Betty Ann was talking about is called Protect. Is there a website?
Protect now.
Protect.org.
Thank you. Thank you. Denisha, you mentioned in your talk some areas of vulnerability or signs of vulnerability. Could you elaborate on that so that we might, if we notice signs, have some kind of a response that can be helpful?
Yeah. Well, it's twofold. So there's signs of vulnerability for what would make them become susceptible to human trafficking. So those are, Betty Ann is a statistics person, but something along the lines of if they have a history of sexual abuse or molestation in their own immediate family, it's like 28 more times likely to become vulnerable to sex trafficking. The other is runaways. So if a child is out on the streets, especially if they're 12 or younger, but the same thing applies for if they're over 12, within the first 24 hours, there's a high likelihood that they'll be approached by a trafficker who will try to, bargain with them, oh, let me help take care of you, being able to recognize that they're a child out there needing assistance. The other things are when they come from families of, brokenness as well, so where physical violence is used in the home around domestic violence or physical abuse, to where those things are equated with love and respect, those things as well. So on the flip side of that, when youth are involved in human trafficking, the signs that we can all see for the kids in our own life are something like the doctor was talking about physical signs of trauma, so unexplained bruising. Of course, there's also the branding, so tattoos that would mark their bodies as territory of a perpetrator. There's also unaccounted for time. So if you have a child in your own home or in your life, or if you work with foster youth and there's time periods where they're gone for a long period of time and they don't want to really talk about what's going on. And the other is if they have any kind of possessions or money that you didn't give them as an adult in their life. So if they are a child who is showing up with their hair done, with different kinds of clothing, the latest bag, all these things that are tips of the iceberg as far as not really equating too much to the trafficker, but everything in the eyes of the child. So there's the two lenses of vulnerabilities.
Mike, you wanted to say something as well?
If I can add to that, just on the law enforcement piece, in terms of how we need to evolve policy-wise, on that topic alone, we are now asking returned runaways if someone caused you or forced you to do anything while you are out there that now you've run home from where you ran from, and those are questions that we weren't asking in the past. We weren't, and these are now being asked in front of parents to give them some awareness as well. So they may not self-report at that real-time conversation, but just the mere fact that, like we've heard from survivors, that law enforcement is concerned about what happened to them out there, it may cause them to report to their parents or one of their friends, a counselor at school, a teacher, some time in the future. And it's a huge change, in my opinion.
Let's see, Christine. I'm sorry, I've lost my. Here we go. Catherine. Yes. Thank you.
I get that all the time.
I grew up in a time when we weren't exactly supposed to question our doctors. So how can we speak with our doctor about how they're preparing themselves in terms of observation, response, in terms of this very important issue? Is there anything you might help nudge us with?
So in other words, how can we find out if the physician is aware of this topic or
right, so that we can be a catalyst for them to look at this more openly, or for us to feel more satisfied that yes, our healthcare team is also on the team as well.
Well, probably asking is there a plan in your medical system, or do you have resources, and have you done any training or been aware of this topic? And if, as I said, many physicians and other healthcare providers may not have yet, because it really is, I think, just coming out of the tip of the iceberg. So it's really good probably to just ask about that and say, would you like some information that I've found out? And I think most people would appreciate that. And as I said, many of us are we're educating ourselves, because this wasn't something that was really it was under the radar. So I think all of us would probably value that.
I noticed that those of us who have been on the committee in terms of putting this all together, that the many people that we talked about, we gave cards out, we gave brochures out, we gave flyers out, that it activated conversations about this. Are there ways in which you can help us activate conversations about this from your experience?
Yes, there's so many different ways. Like I think someone was saying to use your creativity, and I always think that that's the strongest thing, because your creativity loves you, and it loves it. You have a love relationship with it, so you're always going to do that. So you're never going to get away from it. So for example, if you want to do, I have customers now who have done painting parties together, or they've done cooking parties together. So they've come together, they've gotten their friends together to talk about the issue, but it's on the backdrop of something that they really love. With me, I just start having conversations with people in my store, but I keep the little cards. What is it? Yeah, the little. Who are those cards by?
There's some at the Human Trafficking 101.
Okay, so I keep those cards on me. I also keep the Love Never Fails band. Love Never Fails has a band that says Love Never Fails, and on the inside there's a phone number for Love Never Fails. So I pass those out, and I explain to them what they are, or I explain to them what the card is. And for me, I talk a lot, as you probably are aware by now, I talk a lot about love and how to love each other, how to be in community with each other, how to be responsible for each other. So I talk a lot about the roots. So people can talk about that, because we talk about the things here, but there are problems that stem from here. How do we, as a society, speak to those problems that are deep in the ground? How do we speak to the generational trauma in our communities? And so those are all things that began a conversation, that began to bubble up. So, I mean, it's easy to get a group of your friends together to talk about this issue, but also talk about the deeper issues as well, the causes of them. So
And Warren, I would say that so many people who get passionate about this, I know 5 years ago I would be at dinner parties and I'd say, well, I fight human trafficking, and everybody thought of an excuse to go get another hors d'oeuvre or a drink. Yeah. And now enough people said, oh, I've seen something, or oh, I've been handed some material, oh, I've read something about it. But the main thing I would encourage you on here is to take care of yourself as you're learning more about the issue. And by that I mean both in how you share it, because it's like everybody wants a good cup of coffee to drink, but man, if you give them the one that's too hot, it will burn them in a way that is almost like, that is just too much, I don't want to hear more. Versus saying, here's my experience, here's my story, and also taking care of yourself, where I've had some women call me and said, we're going to show a movie at our church next week, so we've watched 7 human trafficking movies in a row this week, and they were all falling to pieces of like, I don't know what to do with myself, because it was so emotional. And so take care of yourself as you learn more about this. With YouTube and other things out there, you can be so overwhelmed so quickly. And one of the things that I talk to a lot of students about is that sense of, even when they're taking classes on this issue, of what secondary trauma is and how real it is, for as you learn about some of these abuses, how you actually make sure that you're taking care of yourself and that you're sharing about it with the community so that you can sustain in this fight. We'd hope that all of you in 2 weeks didn't go, oh, I just went to some day. The hope of the organizers of this event is that you will pick some next steps, and that a year down the road, 5 years down the road, we will still all be standing together against this issue.
Just to add one thing to what Regina was saying, is that there's so many different events all throughout the Bay Area that you can go to as well. I do the same thing. I wear my girls empowerment with human trafficking numbers all the time. But my friends and we do human trafficking runs, 5 and 10Ks, at least once a year, and do blurbs out to our families. We went and saw Regina's play a couple months ago.
And the address of that is?
Excuse me?
Only want the store, that's my store.
The store, yeah.
Oh,
The store, the address of the store?
oh no, yeah.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Never mind.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay.
Name, it's Ross.
And we went and saw Regina's play, and we invited some friends who weren't aware of it. So it doesn't always have to be like this super tough, topic to talk about off the grid. There's other ways to combat it, to where it's exposing them through running, through art, through plays, through poetry, and then being available to have those follow-up conversations with them.
Would you please give us the address of your store? And the way in which I would recommend that this be done is that not only can you support her, but also you might consider how you can extend your own lives in reaching out to people in need.
Okay, so my store is Regina's Door, and I'm located at 352 17th Street in downtown Oakland. I'm between Webster and Franklin. And you can reach me at evans.regina@gmail.com or 510-562-2336. And then also, I wanted to give the address again for Protect. It's protectnow.org. Is that correct, Benita? Okay, protectnow.org.
Also, a question has been asked about other languages. Is there information available, and particularly in our area, Spanish, but also other languages as well?
Yeah, so a great resource for further information is the National Human Trafficking Hotline, polarisproject.org, and you can actually go on their website, and they have a language bank of up to 160 languages, I believe it is at this point. But also, the Department of Health and Human Services has a bunch of free posters and those cards Regina was talking about, and you can order as many as you want for a school, any groups you're involved with, a faith community, and you can go on and those are in a number of languages as well. Pamela. Yeah, I would encourage everyone to stop by the Human Trafficking 101 table after this. Ruby and Leo Jacques, two folks on the board of the BAATC, are there to answer any questions you have, and there are so many resources there. Definitely don't leave without stopping by there. And there are definitely resources there in Spanish, so we've got 2 languages there today.
And we've talked about, we've mentioned boys, men, but are there also resources for boys? Anybody know of that?
It's one of the big gaps. I know everyone on the panel here kind of takes a deep breath because it's when one of the first homes first opened up for survivors of trafficking in the Bay Area, the first call they got from the FBI was, "Are you ready for us to bring 11 boys to you?" And it was just, they were aghast because they had done the whole home ready for girls under the age of 18 who were all American citizens. And so looking for resources for boys that are survivors of trafficking is very difficult. And it is one of those things where we're learning in the survivors that we've met, they are incredibly courageous and they are really trying to build their own path and figure out where they can get help and the resources they need to move with their life forward. But I have their greatest respect because right now that is one of the biggest gaps. There are a few homes in the country where there would be beds for survivors of human trafficking who are male, but those are few and far between. I know of 6, and they each have about 6 beds. So it's really under-resourced at this point.
And would anybody like to, or would somebody comment on the issue of labor trafficking in our county?
I will.
Yeah.
So like we heard this morning, there is, in terms of volume, this is happening in San Mateo County on all topics. Whether, and some of it isn't necessarily, grave and criminal. Some of it could be an inappropriate family nanny relationship where the family just doesn't understand what a real family nanny relationship is supposed to look like. So some of it is awareness. Now, once you understand what it's supposed to be and you choose to exploit, now you're talking about criminal behavior. But we're looking to educate on the labor side as well, whether that's in the hotel industry. All of our conversations are about sexual exploitation and labor, because whether it's a hotel or a restaurant or migrant farm workers down in Pescadero, we're trying to build capacity where we have a vehicle where someone can report and get some help. But like we heard this morning, labor is definitely a tougher issue. We just talked about language barriers. Language barriers and cultural barriers are even a bigger piece of the labor trafficking. But I'm inspired by the effort of San Mateo County to fix gaps and close gaps where they are, and we're making progress there as well.
2 specific cases this past November: a nail salon and hair salon and a Spanish restaurant in Saratoga were shut down with folks who had been brought in from Spain under the premise of doing other work, and they were made to work just a crazy amount of hours, not being paid. So that's a case to look up locally of labor trafficking. But some of the biggest cases in the Bay Area so far have been labor trafficking cases. Thai workers brought in to work on the Bay Bridge. One of the things that's shocking is the first case ever to be prosecuted on human trafficking in Northern California was a domestic servitude case, and it was in Walnut Creek. So it wasn't in some of the places we might go to of like thinking it's here or there. It is all over the Bay. And that was a case of kids being dropped off at school, and the teachers noticed that the nanny had disheveled hair, she never met anyone's eye, and she had the same outfit on for 5 months in a row. So while the kids looked well groomed every day, she had the same outfit on. It was just enough for them to call the cops, who got the FBI involved, and when they did uncover what was going on, she was made to sleep under the stairs, barely given any food. Her documents had been taken from her. She was threatened with deportation, and that was the first case of human trafficking to be uncovered here. So labor trafficking is definitely often less talked about, but oftentimes are some of the bigger cases in terms of how many people involved, but also oftentimes in a labor trafficking case, there's also sex abuse going on.
And let me give you a story of a missed opportunity from my career, and it could happen today, but now we understand what it means. 20 years ago, we take an alarm call at a restaurant, and 5 people were inside. It's 2:00 in the morning. I'm a graveyard dog handler. It's 5 people are inside the restaurant. We thought it was a burglary in progress. We didn't. It wasn't. They were all employees. We called the responsible down, the restaurant owner, and they said, "Yeah, these are my guys. They're cleaning." What they were probably doing is living there, and we know that if you're living there, you're probably being exploited. We didn't understand where we had an opportunity to potentially save 5 victims on that night, and that's also part of what drives our work today, is because we knew we had it then, we know we're going to have it tomorrow, and tomorrow we got to be ready for it.
So it's been a long day, and I know there's still more. And so I'm going to ask us to take a break in a moment, and I'm going to ask each of you maybe to give us 1 or 2 sentences about something that you hope we will do after this session. Thank you so much today for today. Regina? Just something that you hope we'll do with all of this.
I think, again, just a simple act of kindness. A simple act of kindness will go a very long way, and you never know that person's story. You never know their backstory. You never know what they're going through. And you can change somebody's life by doing a simple act of kindness. So that's what I would say.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Catherine.
Well, I think it's good to realize that we all have much more power than we are aware of, and you could donate to any of these organizations. You could join and just be an advocate, and just being aware and just sharing these stories with people around you, families, relatives, friends, children. You're going to really be part of this evolution of consciousness, which I think we were realizing we needed to have. And I wanted to mention one other part with Shared Hope is they do have a program called Defenders for Men to pledge to not use the sex industry, pornography, etc., strip clubs. And I think that it's important for men to feel that they have a place where they could speak up and say, we're not going to be part of this demand, because we really haven't talked about that yet, but I think that that's another part that I would look to see that needs to be addressed.
Thank you. Thank you.
There's a lot that's been shared today, and there are a lot of resources available to you. I would just encourage you to take some next step, and I would encourage you to visit the HT 101 table for that. At the BAATC, in all of our trainings, by the end, sometimes people's eyes are glazed and rolled back, and like, what can I do? And we simply put, what can you do in 10 minutes, 10 days, and 10 months to fight human trafficking? Put it on a timeline that is doable for you in the life you are currently living with the people you know and love, and say, what can I do in 10 minutes? Maybe put the national hotline number in my phone. What can I do in 10 days? Check out some of the websites. Start reading one of the books you picked up today. In 10 months, maybe it is do a run or host a bike ride or a fundraiser or go attend a training. But definitely just take a next step after today. Don't let this be an endpoint.
Thank you, Denisha. Denisha.
It was going to be the same thing as far as making sure you also educate the young boys in your life as well, because there is no demand. There's no supply without the demand. My 6-year-old son is in the audience today, and he knows exactly what I do, and we have tons of talks around not putting your hands on women, respect, taking care of your body, being aware of your own space, because as a boy, he's not immune to any of those things as well. And so just not getting so pigeonholed in your idea of what human trafficking is, and being able to educate yourself, educate those around you, and paying equal attention to both sides. There's not nearly enough work done on traffickers. There's not nearly enough work done on victims of human trafficking. But from those who I have worked with or spoken to, some of the traffickers have similar backgrounds of sex abuse, neglect, physical abuse, witnessing domestic violence, as our survivor victims do as well. And so there's something happening in those lives of those traffickers, be it men or women, because there are definitely women traffickers, that sparks that for them. And so just being mindful of that as well.
Thank you. Mike.
One of the many reasons why I carry this little one-page definition document around with me is because when you hear this stuff, it's overwhelming initially, and you leave with wow. We all take something, whether it's a memory or something tangible like this piece of paper, and revisit it tomorrow, Monday, after you've kind of had a little bit of time to digest today, and continue to ask yourself, how can I engage? What can I do? This is part of a bigger movement in our society, the see something, say something movement. The days of thinking that I cannot get involved in that problem are over, because that problem is not going to stop unless we, as a society, engage to stop it. So thank you for having me.
Thank you all, and thank you all for coming.